right, come on, let's get out of here!
Every hero needs an old, wise mentor who's experienced everything life has to offer. Luke Skywalker had Yoda, and Daniel LaRusso had Mr. Miyagi. This soft-spoken Japanese man is the very soul of the Karate Kid franchise and all the spin-offs inspired by it. With Cobra Kai finally reaching its much-awaited epic climax, it'll be tying up several loose ends about the lesser-known aspects of Mr. Miyagi's life. While the man himself never appears in the series, he's undoubtedly the central figure without whom there would have been no such show. Daniel is by far an extension of Mr. Miyagi's teachings, and his dojo runs on the principles and values that the late Mr. Miyagi had imparted to it. Despite being the central character of the franchise and the series, Mr. Miyagi's life is still shrouded in mystery. For most, what we know about him is extremely poignant. A skilled karate master like him could have easily amassed a lot of respect and gathered as many students as he would have liked, but he chose to live his life as a handyman in the US. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the entire life of Mr. Miyagi, highlighting his childhood and time in the US military through all the Karate Kid movies and expanded adaptations. Before we get too deep into our explanation though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I never married.
Early life and background. Nariyoshi Miyagi, also referred to as Keisuke Miyagi, was born in Tomi Village, Okinawa, Japan on the 9th of June in 1925. He had learned karate from his father, who was a fisherman, who also taught the martial arts style to Sato, Mr. Miyagi's best friend. The family had a long lineage of martial arts practitioners going all the way back to 1625. Shimpo Miyagi, one of the ancestors, was extremely fond of both fishing and sake. One day, he had too much to drink, and as a result, he passed out on his fishing boat, which drifted from the coast of Okinawa all the way to the coast of China. 10 years after this, Shimpo Miyagi returned to his native place with a Chinese wife, 2 children, and the secret of the Miyagi family karate. Like many other Okinawan karate masters, it's very likely that Shimpo Miyagi had learned about karate from China and carried the teachings back to Japan. The unique culture of Okinawa is a blend of both Japanese and some Chinese traditions, which is perfectly seen in how Miyagi-Do karate developed over the years. When he was a teenager, Mr. Miyagi fell in love with a young woman named Yuki. However, she was supposed to be married off to Sato, Mr. Miyagi's best friend. Pre-arranged marriages were common in Okinawa at the time, and agreements like this were to be honored strictly. But Mr. Miyagi was young and rebellious, and he made a great spectacle about wanting to do away with this tradition so he could marry Yuki, who he loved. Sato felt very humiliated by this because it painted his honor in a black light when his best friend expressed romantic affection for the woman who was supposed to be his wife. In a fit of anger, he challenged Mr. Miyagi to a fight to the death. Mr. Miyagi, however, was not ready to fight his best friend and thus decided to leave Okinawa in the middle of the night and emigrated to the United States of America. He first moved to Hawaii and worked as a laborer in cane fields, where he eventually met his wife, who was also doing the same job. Eventually, they both moved to Los Angeles.
Sergeant Miyagi? Yes, sir!
Military service and personal tragedies. With the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, the USA officially joined the Second World War. Fear of Japanese espionage ran rampant as a result of the events in the Pacific, and Japanese Americans were actively discouraged from joining the war. Even those who were in the Army were demoted to reserve units. However, 2 years later, in 1943, the US government issued a call for Japanese American volunteers to join the Army. Mr. Miyagi may have initially been hesitant to fight a war against his own country. He was later drafted in early 1944. While the Japanese Americans were recruited and drafted, there was still a lot of apprehension regarding their loyalties, so the entire 442nd Regimental Combat Team was stationed at the European Theater, mainly in Italy. They took part and fought valiantly in the Battle of Anzio. Mr. Miyagi was at war, and his now pregnant wife was stationed at the Manzanar internment. Mr. Miyagi was not only elevated to the rank of Staff Sergeant, his unit also became one of the most decorated in the history of the United States Army, with 21 recipients recipients of the Medal of Honor. The Japanese master was also among the recipients, and he was also awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Presidential Unit Citation, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Good Conduct Medal, and more. Clearly, he was a very decorated soldier. Mr. Miyagi also developed a close bond with his commanding officer, Lieutenant Jack Pierce, after the latter saved his life during the war. He taught him karate in exchange for formal dance lessons. The man suffered his greatest personal tragedy in late 1944 when his wife and son passed away at the Manzanar camp due to complications from childbirth. No doctor was available to treat them, and Mr. Miyagi himself was stationed far away in the war. A tragedy of this magnitude shook the man completely, and he never remarried or had children, preferring a solitary existence. At some point in the late 1940s or 50s, he took part in the Sakai Taikai tournament and apparently fought an opponent to the death. The war had possibly forced Mr. Miyagi to confront moral dilemmas that tested his deeply held beliefs. Though he was a skilled fighter, he had always seen karate as a tool for peace. He never glorified his military service, choosing instead to focus on the personal losses he suffered rather than his achievements. It's possible that his combat experience reinforced his belief that true strength lay not in physical dominance but in wisdom and restraint. These lessons would later define his teaching style and the principles he instilled in his students. Following his discharge from the military, Mr. Miyagi no longer had a family to return to. He became a maintenance man in California and had a small house with a garden that he religiously looked after. He also worked on restoring a collection of classic cars, which included a yellow 1947 Ford Super Deluxe, a 1955 Cadillac sedan, a blue and white Nash Metropolitan, and a 1951-53 Woody wagon.
Yut! Yeah! Very good, Daniel-san. Yut! Yeah!
Becoming a Sensei, The Karate Kid, 1984. In his very first appearance in the Karate Kid movie, Mr. Miyagi is shown to be working as a handyman in the apartment that Daniel LaRusso moves to. He is shown to be a quiet man who keeps to himself and doesn't really stand out much. That is, until he swoops in and defeats the Cobra Kai students with ease, who were beating the hell out of Daniel. He then takes Daniel back to his house and treats his wounds. The next day, both of them go to the Cobra Kai dojo, where Mr. Miyagi politely but firmly asks the teacher, John Kreese, to ask his students to leave Daniel alone. However, Kreese, being the ever-crooked man he is, says he'll do nothing of the sort and edges Daniel to fight his best student, Johnny Lawrence. Mr. Miyagi's patience runs thin, and he suggests that to even the playing field, Daniel will face the Cobra Kai students in the All-Valley tournament a few weeks later, once he's had the chance to hone his own skills. Kreese is confident in his students and agrees to the challenge. He also says that the Cobra Kai students won't harm Daniel until then, and thus begins Daniel's karate training at the hands of Mr. Miyagi, which appears immensely confusing to him at first. All he does is wax cars with a sponge, paint the house, sand the walkway, and stain the fence. Moreover, he's required to do them in the exact way Mr. Miyagi had shown him. While he agrees to this at first, he gets increasingly frustrated at not having learned any real karate and confronts the older man. Mr. Miyagi then asks him to show the motions he had learned while doing the chores, so much so that they have become almost muscle memory. That's when Daniel realizes that all the activities he had been doing so far were defense tactics, which were helping him build strength. Mr. Miyagi attacks Daniel, who's able to defend himself with those moves alone. In the following weeks, the older man teaches Daniel more moves and emphasizes the need for balance. It's during this time that Mr. Miyagi opens up to the teenager about the death of his wife and son in the internment camp while he was drafted in the army. In a drunken stupor, Mr. Miyagi recounted how he was told that his wife had complications at birth and no doctor came. He also said the words, "Land of free, home of brave," possibly expressing his deep-born sadness at how the country he fought for didn't bother to spend resources saving his family. It's to be noted that while the subject of camps comes up in the movie, actor Pat Morita, who played Mr. Miyagi, didn't have to rely too much on imagination. While he spent time in the hospital due to a spinal disorder initially, as soon as he made a recovery, he was sent to his parents in a relocation center. Morita later said that while fancy terms were used to describe the places the Japanese Americans were sent to, they were America's version of concentration camps. In the All-Valley tournament, Daniel swiftly manages to rise up the ranks, which spells trouble for John Kreese. He has Bobby Brown, his second-best student, perform an illegal move on Daniel in the semifinals. Bobby does it reluctantly, and as a result, Daniel suffers a very serious injury and has to be taken out of the competition. The attending doctor informs him that he cannot continue, but he asks Mr. Miyagi to help him using a pain suppression technique so he can win the final round. The older man tells him that he has nothing more to prove, but Daniel resolutely says that he cannot achieve balance unless he knows that his bullies have not gotten the best of him. Mr. Miyagi then partially heals his leg and Daniel returns to the competition. John Kreese asks Johnny, who Daniel is facing in the finals, to aim for Daniel's already injured leg. Despite being a bully, Johnny is not particularly thrilled at this order, but reluctantly agrees. The match is tied, and Daniel is barely able to stand straight due to his aggravated injury. As a last resort, he assumes the crane stance, which he had seen Mr. Miyagi perform at the beach. He delivers a final kick to Johnny and scores the winning point, becoming the champion of the tournament. Mr. Miyagi looks on with an approving smile. Returning to Okinawa, The Karate Kid, Part 2. The second movie takes off from the end of the first one as Kreese is seen attacking Johnny viciously for having lost to Daniel in the tournament. Daniel confronts the teacher and asks him to let go of Johnny, but he tries to threaten Mr. Miyagi. The older man then pulls Kreese off Johnny and starts engaging in a fight. The fight is quite unmatched because Kreese cannot even come close to Miyagi's level. Just before delivering a fatal blow, Mr. Miyagi tweaks Kreese's nose and leaves him humiliated in front of everyone. After witnessing this, the students of the Cobra Kai dojo abandon him. 6 months later, Daniel informs Mr. Miyagi that his girlfriend, Allie Mills, has broken up with him and is now dating a UCLA football player. Mr. Miyagi himself receives news that his elderly father is on his deathbed and he needs to return to Okinawa. He tells Daniel how he had fallen in love with Yuki when he was young and had even wanted to marry her by going against their custom, since Yuki was to be married to Sato. Daniel decides to accompany Mr. Miyagi to Okinawa. Upon arrival, Chozen Toguchi greets them and reveals himself to be Sato's nephew. The man himself makes an appearance, and it seems like he's held on to the grudge from many years ago because he still demands Mr. Miyagi fight him to the death, which the latter refuses adamant. When they arrive at the village where Mr. Miyagi was born, they're greeted by Yuki and her niece Kumiko. They learn that Sato is a big industrialist whose super trawlers have deeply affected the fish population of the village, which has in turn impoverished the villagers. If you remember, Miyagi's family, and by extension most others in their village, were fishermen. The poor villagers rent property from Sato because he owns the land title of the area. Yuki also reveals she never actually got married because she too loved Mr. Miyagi. Amidst this, Mr. Miyagi's father sadly passes away and Sato gives him 3 days of mourning before challenging him to a duel. Mr. Miyagi shows Daniel the secret of his family's karate, a den-den daiko. It's a handheld drum that twists back and forth, illustrating a drum technique. This is a counter-striking karate move that Daniel starts to practice as he starts developing a romance with the young Kumiko. Unintentionally, Daniel also exposes Chozen of being corrupt with his grocery business, which angers the young Japanese lad, and he confronts Daniel violently. He and his cronies even go to the point of vandalizing Mr. Miyagi's property, but are overwhelmed by the man himself. Before the situation gets worse, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel think of leaving for the USA, but Sato makes it clear that he will ruin the lives of the villagers if Mr. Miyagi doesn't fight him. Exasperated, the older man agrees to the fight but asks Sato to relinquish the land rights regardless of the result of the fight, and Sato agrees. However, on the day of the fight, a typhoon hits Okinawa and everyone rushes to take shelter. Sato's dojo collapses and Daniel, accompanied by Mr. Miyagi, rushes to save him from under the wreckage. When Daniel tries to save a child, Sato orders Chozen to help him, but Chozen refuses. Sato humiliates and publicly disowns Chozen for this, and the enraged young man runs away. The next day, when the storm has subsided, Sato arrives at the village and hands over the land deed. He asks for forgiveness from Mr. Miyagi and says he'll be hosting the Obon Festival. The festival goes well until Chozen appears out of nowhere, takes Kumiko hostage, and demands Daniel fight with him to the death. While the American fights bravely, Chozen overwhelms him at first. Following this, Sato, Mr. Miyagi, and the rest of the crowd start twisting den-den daikos together, which helps Daniel utilize the drum technique he had learned. With this, he's able to defeat Chozen, and mirroring what Mr. Miyagi had done to John Kreese at the beginning of the film, Daniel twists Chozen's nose instead of delivering a killing blow. Facing new challenges. Karate Kid Part 3. In the third installment of the franchise, John Kreese is left penniless and decides to visit a fellow soldier from his time in the army, Terry Silver. Silver vows to help him re-establish Cobra Kai and exact revenge not just on Mr. Miyagi, but also on Daniel. He sends Kreese to Tahiti to take some time off and recruits Mike Barnes, a karate champion with no moral compass or sportsmanship. Barnes is to join the next All-Valley tournament and challenge Daniel. Meanwhile, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel return to LA after visiting Okinawa and find out that the South Seas apartment complex has been sold and demolished. This leaves Mr. Miyagi without a job and Daniel homeless. Since his mother was back in New Jersey, he moves in with his karate teacher temporarily. Additionally, he uses his college fund to open a bonsai shop with Mr. Miyagi, who makes him a business partner. The two start exploring kata training, and this is when Terry Silver approaches them and informs them that John Kreese has passed away. Silver's goons start harassing Daniel and vandalize the bonsai shop, stealing all the trees in stock. The intention is to drive a wedge between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. The former is forced to sign up for the All-Valley tournament and learn karate at Cobra Kai to prepare himself. The training is extremely brutal and takes a toll on Daniel completely, so much so that he becomes unnecessarily violent. Troubled by his actions, Daniel tries to make amends with Mr. Miyagi and informs Silver that he won't be taking part in the tournament after all. An enraged Silver then gives up his facade and brings out Barnes to attack Daniel. Kreese also appears, which proves to Daniel how everything had been a lie. He's cornered with no means to escape, but just then, Miyagi arrives and effortlessly defeats all three villains. He also agrees to let Daniel participate in the All-Valley tournament. Silver reveals his plan of turning Cobra Kai into a business franchise and makes Barnes severely injure Daniel. Daniel becomes uncharacteristically fearful, wanting to quit. However, Mr. Miyagi calmly tells him that Daniel still has karate inside him and it can help him win. Daniel perseveres and finally uses the kata technique on Barnes, defeating him and winning the tournament once more. Training a new student, the next Karate Kid. This is the only movie that doesn't star Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso, and instead, as the title suggests, focuses on another Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi travels to the Arlington National Cemetery in Boston for a commendation event dedicated to all the Japanese-American soldiers who had taken part in the Second World War. He meets Louisa Pierce, the widow of his commanding officer Jack Pierce. The couple has a granddaughter named Julie, who is a teen struggling with anger issues after the untimely death of her parents. Her behavior has caused a rift between her and her grandmother, as well as in school. However, deep down, she's just a scared young girl who genuinely knows how to care for others. This is seen when she cares for an injured hawk who she has named Angel and keeps her safely hidden on the roof of the school. Mr. Miyagi asks Louisa to take a break and live in LA for a while and tend to his garden while he stays back as Julie's caretaker. Julie befriends Eric, a young security guard in training. She also received unwarranted sexual advances from Ned Randall, who is a member of the fraternity Alpha Elite. The fraternity is taught to enforce school rules with violence and aggression by self-styled Colonel Paul Dugan. Julie escapes a car accident by instinctively using the tiger position and opens up to Mr. Miyagi about how she had learned karate from her father, but learned it from her grandfather. Interestingly, her grandfather himself had learned karate from Mr. Miyagi when they were both in the army. Julie gets caught one night by Alpha Elite while she's trying to feed Angel, and even though she escapes, she's suspended for 2 weeks by Dugan. Mr. Miyagi takes this time to take her to a Buddhist monastery to teach her about karate and also help with her anger issues. She learns about awareness, balance, and coordination and befriends the monks. They have a birthday party for her with cake, and together they visit a bowling alley in Boston. However, once she returns to school, Julie learns that Angel was discovered by Ned and called Animal Control. Mr. Miyagi helps her release the bird back into the wild using his classic pain suppression method to heal the injured wing. He also teaches Julie how to dance and buys her a dress for prom. He attends with Eric, but under Dugan's orders, the Alpha Elite ruin the event. Nevertheless, Eric drives her back home and the pair kiss, which angers Ned. He damages Eric's car and challenges him to a fight at the docks, where he's joined by the other members of Alpha Elite, as well as Dugan himself. They set fire to the car and beat him severely, but Julie and Mr. Miyagi arrive on time. Ned again tries to grab Julie, but she's had enough and challenges him to fight her. Using the karate she had learned, she subdues him, even though he disarms her temporarily by throwing sand into her eyes. Dugan instigates the rest of the group to fight and then goes up to Mr. Miyagi himself, but loses in a very humiliating manner. The Alpha Elite abandon him, just how the students of Cobra Kai had abandoned John Kreese in the earlier movies. This film reinforced Mr. Miyagi's role as a mentor and expanded his legacy beyond a single student. Mr. Miyagi's animated wisdom, guiding the next generation. In 1989, the Karate Kid TV series debuted on NBC's Saturday morning lineup. Produced by Deke Enterprises, Saban Entertainment, and Columbia Pictures Television, it followed the adventures of Daniel and Mr. Miyagi across the globe. The tournament-style pattern of the movies was discarded. Instead, it followed an adventure/quest setting which required the teacher and student duo to use their karate skills judiciously to do the right thing. Daniel LaRusso was voiced by Joey Didio, and Mr. Miyagi was voiced by Robert Ito. However, Pat Morita, the original Mr. Miyagi, would narrate the episode's plot from his character's point of view in every episode except for the 8th. Originally planned for 65 episodes in daily syndication, the show eventually finished with just 13. The story revolves around a miniature magical shrine which was stolen from its resting place in Okinawa, and Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are tasked with recovering it. They are joined by Taki Tamurai, an Okinawan girl, and search across the globe for the lost item. In every episode, Mr. Miyagi obtains a lead on where the shrine could be located, and Daniel and Taki follow up on this. They also encounter several villains who try to acquire the shrine for their own nefarious purposes. While Daniel defeats the villains every episode, the shrine always manages to slip out of his hands, and thus, the search continues in the next episode. The first episode takes place in South America, where a shy teenager from the Shuar tribe stumbles upon the shrine, believing it holds the key to gaining the confidence and strength he needs to pass his coming-of-age tests. However, Mr. Miyagi helps him realize that true confidence comes from within. With Daniel's guidance, the boy trains through a series of physical challenges to prepare for his warrior rights. In the next episode, set in Hong Kong, a crime gang called Dragon is terrorizing a neighborhood. A group of activists hope the shrine can help them defeat the gang, but when the leader gets his hands on it, he twists its power to brainwash people into becoming his loyal enforcers. Mr. Miyagi teaches the activists that the best way to fight organized crime is through unity and collective action. Together, they form a community watch group, raising awareness and standing up against Dragon's misdeeds. The third episode takes the trio to New York City, where they're searching for the shrine in New Jersey, where Daniel once lived. Their next adventure brings them to Paris, where they pursue a smuggler with a sweet tooth for chocolate parfait, who's also after the shrine. Meanwhile, a man known as the Amazing Roland, a street performer claiming to be a psychic, starts experiencing real visions. One of these visions hints at Mr. Miyagi's possible death, sending Daniel into a panic, but the older man reassures him that fate must take its course. Later, in London, the trio finds themselves on the set of a King Arthur movie. They soon discover that the shrine's power has been transferred into a prop sword which the film's leading man wields. The actor, unable to separate fiction from reality, becomes convinced that Taki is his actual bride and that Daniel is a threat. Chaos ensues as Mr. Miyagi and his friends try to set things right. In Tijuana, Mexico, Daniel unexpectedly reunites with his uncle Jack, who works for the FBI. At first, Daniel is fascinated by his uncle's career, imagining thrilling undercover missions. That is until Jack reveals that his job mostly involves filing reports. However, he is investigating a group of small-time bandits operating along the Mexico-US border who have begun abusing the shrine's power to transform from petty criminals to full-blown supervillains. Meanwhile, Daniel struggles with the blinding sandstorms, prompting Mr. Miyagi to teach him how to rely on his other senses in combat. Next, in the Himalayas, the shrine has been submerged in a mountain spring with the bizarre ability to reverse aging. The village elders, desperate to connect with the younger generation, drink the water to become youthful again. However, instead of using their second chance wisely, they get carried away, abandoning their responsibilities and turning the village into one big party. When a harsh snowstorm rolls in, the lack of proper housing and preparedness threatens disaster. Daniel, Mr. Miyagi, and Taki manage to return the shrine to Okinawa, but trouble awaits back home as Taki must handle a family feud that could once again put the shrine at risk. In Australia, the trio meets an Aboriginal man who has seen the shrine, but he is torn since the members of his tribe are blackmailing him, forcing him into a moral dilemma about who to help. Meanwhile, in what was once the USSR, the group discovers the shrine hidden within a Soviet scientific research facility. The setting is charged with tension as the Friendship Games are taking place, marking the first time Western nations have been invited as part of the Glasnost effort. Daniel, having somehow landed a spot on the West's hockey team, panics because he can't even skate. Mr. Miyagi steps in with his signature unorthodox training methods. Meanwhile, a Soviet scientist secretly steals the shrine, using its power to enhance his son, who plays for the East's team. But their attempt to prove Soviet superiority quickly spirals out of control. The trio's next adventure takes them aboard a whaling vessel in Norway after learning that a white whale has swallowed the shrine. Then, in San Francisco, they track the artifact to a reclusive tycoon named Frum. Along the way, they encounter the Grey Ghosts, a group of senior citizens who are classic car enthusiasts. Daniel teams up with one of them, quickly realizing that his assumptions about elderly people couldn't be more wrong. In the final episode, Down South, the shrine falls into the hands of a shy boy named Walter, who discovers that its power allows him to shrink real objects, adding them to his model train collection. Things take a strange turn when Walter, unwilling to give up the shrine, shrinks Daniel and Mr. Miyagi as well. Now they're tiny and must find a way to restore themselves, while also helping Walter build the confidence he needs to ask a pretty girl to a party. However, Walter isn't just using the shrine for his hobby, he's also seeking revenge on two bullies. Mr. Miyagi warns him that overusing the shrine not only weakens it, but that vengeance will only bring harm in the long run. While the animated series wasn't as popular as the movies, Mr. Miyagi remained the main essence of everything regarding the Karate Kid. His philosophy and lessons were portrayed as paramount, even when Daniel had to go beyond the All-Valley tournaments and cement his role in using karate to leave an impact across the world. The events of this series are not considered canon, but in the third season of Cobra Kai, a scene in Chosen's dojo showed an artifact that looked a lot like the shrine from the animated series. Mr. Miyagi in books and expanded lore. The Karate Kid, the classic illustrated storybook, is a special edition picture book inspired by the 1984 film, The Karate Kid. Part of Quirk Books' Pop Classics series in collaboration with Sony Pictures, it was released on May 7, 2019 to celebrate the film's 35th anniversary. Illustrated by Kim Smith, this charming book is designed for young readers aged 3 to 6. It's important to note that the events in this storybook aren't considered official canon. Scholastic had previously published novelizations of the Karate Kid films written by American author B.B. Hiller. These books closely follow the original scripts but offer little additional content. However, the novelizations concluded after the next Karate Kid. Another adaptation, Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid Saga Continues, Johnny's Story, is a comic book series published by IDW Publishing. This series retells the story of the Karate Kid from Johnny Lawrence's point of view. Written by Denton J. Tipton with artwork by Kagan McLeod and colors by Luis Antonio Delgado, it provides an alternate perspective on the plot of the movie. However, like the storybook, the comics are not considered canon. For fans of Cobra Kai, the kick-ass book of Cobra Kai serves as an official behind-the-scenes companion to the hit Netflix series. Published by HarperCollins, it was released on November 15, 2022 and is available in hardcover, ebook, and even audiobook format. Mr. Miyagi, as usual, serves as the central figure in all of these adaptations because had it not been for him, Daniel would never have learned karate in the first place and none of the movies would have even happened. Mr. Miyagi in video games. Numerous video game adaptations of the movies and the show have been made, and Mr. Miyagi's influence on Daniel is clear in all of them. Released exclusively in North America in November 1987, The Karate Kid for the Nintendo Entertainment System is a side-scrolling action game inspired by the 1984 film, The Karate Kid, and its 1986 sequel, The Karate Kid Part 2. Developed by the Japanese company Atlas Co. Limited and published by LJN, players take on the role of Daniel LaRusso beginning at the All-Valley Karate Tournament before traveling to Okinawa. Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid Saga Continues is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game based on the hit web series Cobra Kai. Published by Game Mill Entertainment, it was released for Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One on October 27, 2020, followed by a PC release via Steam on January 5th, 2021. A sequel to Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid Saga Continues, Cobra Kai 2 Dojo's Rising, was released on November 8, 2022 for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam. Developed by Flux Game Studio and published by Game Mill Entertainment, the game expands on the Cobra Kai universe with a deeper roster of 28 playable characters. Players can dive into story mode to experience a brand new storyline or relive memorable moments from the show in Cobra Classics mode. The Karate Kid Street Rumble is a 2D 16-bit side-scrolling beat-em-up based on the Karate Kid trilogy. Published by Game Mail Entertainment, the game will be available on Android, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam. Players can take on the roles of Daniel LaRusso, Mr. Miyagi, Ali Mills, and Kumiko, with levels inspired by the first 3 films. Boss battles will feature iconic antagonists such as Johnny Lawrence, John Kreese, Chozen Toguchi, and Terry Silver. Mr. Miyagi's legacy in Cobra Kai. While it's not explicitly mentioned if Daniel and Mr. Miyagi kept in touch after the former's win in the 1985 All-Valley tournament, it can be assumed that they did, since Mr. Miyagi was very close to Amanda, Daniel's wife, as well as their 2 children. The bonsai store they had started did not ultimately become successful. Mr. Miyagi passed away on November 15, 2011. He had instructed the Toguchi clan in Okinawa to hide the secret scrolls of his karate techniques, which Daniel was not aware of. Moreover, Daniel also didn't know about his involvement in the Sekai Taikai. A lot of fans suggest that during the 40s and 50s, when Mr. Miyagi was at his peak, he probably had a very aggressive and ruthless fighting style. This could have been caused by the unresolved anger and trauma that stemmed from losing his wife and child while he was away at war. In that era, martial arts tournaments allowed lethal outcomes, and he once took the life of an opponent, whether intentionally or by accident. However, by the time he crossed paths with Daniel, he was not a violent man by any means. He carried a wealth of philosophical insight and had a sharp, witty sense of humor. As a mentor to both Daniel and Julie Pierce, he became a father figure to both, guiding them with patience and care. Despite his formidable combat skills, he never misused his power, fighting only when necessary to protect himself or others. Even after his passing in November 2011, his legacy endured through Daniel, who carried forward his teachings by mentoring students like Robbie and aspiring to be the kind of teacher that Mr. Miyagi was. He earned the respect of almost everyone, including former adversaries like Chozen, though a few, such as John Kreese, remained exceptions. Mr. Miyagi's wisdom, kindness, and strength left an unforgettable mark on those who knew him. In Season 1 of Cobra Kai, we see that Mr. Miyagi left his house to Daniel, who now owns the property. Though the man is gone, his influence remains strong in Daniel's life. Seeking balance, Daniel returns to karate and mentors Robbie Keane. Mr. Miyagi is frequently mentioned and appears in numerous flashbacks. In the following season, as Daniel teaches Miyagi-Do karate, he often recalls the older man's lessons. In a flashback, Mr. Miyagi is seen training Daniel. When Daniel reunites with Kreese, the latter mocks Mr. Miyagi's passing, but Daniel reminds him of his past defeats at the hands of the man. Tensions rise when Cobra Kai students vandalize Daniel's dojo, with Hawk stealing the Japanese man's Medal of Honor. Miguel eventually returns it to Robbie. After a violent school fight leaves Sam injured and Miguel critically hurt, Amanda insists Daniel shut down Miyagi-Do. Devastated, Daniel takes down a picture of Mr. Miyagi and apologizes for failing his teachings. Seeking to save his business, Daniel later travels to Okinawa, where he reconnects with Chozen, who now teaches Miyagi-Do. Chozen reveals a hidden, more lethal side of Miyagi-Do that Daniel was never taught. After training together, the Japanese master teaches him pressure point techniques, acknowledging Mr. Miyagi's wisdom and honor. During a fight at Sam's house, Tori shatters a framed picture of the man, but looking at it gives Sam the courage to fight back. Later, Daniel defeats Kreese using the pressure point technique he had learned. With their feud and Kreese uniting them, Daniel and Johnny merge their dojos, using Mr. Miyagi's house as their training ground. In the tournament finals in Season 4, Daniel reconciles with Johnny, recalling Mr. Miyagi's advice that he must find his own way in karate. After losing, Daniel visits his teacher's grave, reflecting on his efforts to uphold Miyagi-Do's teachings and unite with Johnny, only for none of it to work. He asks Chozen for help, and together they bow in respect at Mr. Miyagi's grave, ready for the fight ahead. However, after being beaten by Silver and feeling defeated, Daniel considers giving up. Amanda, Johnny, Chozen, and Sam remind him that Mr. Miyagi would want him to keep fighting. Amanda takes him to Mr. Miyagi's old room, sharing how the man had given her the courage to marry Daniel. With newfound determination and the support of his family and friends, he resolves to bring Silver down. In the final season, the students suggest renaming the dojo Miyagi Fang Karate with a logo featuring Mr. Miyagi with fangs. Daniel and Chozen find it disrespectful, while Johnny is in favor. Ultimately, Johnny concedes and the name Miyagi-Do remains, but with an updated logo featuring an eagle soaring above a bonsai tree. While sorting through Miyagi's belongings, Daniel and Chozen uncover numerous mysterious items, including an old newspaper article about a robbery involving someone named Keisuke Miyagi. Shocked, Daniel realizes Mr. Miyagi may have been hiding something dark. They track down an old boxing gym connected to the man and learn that he once fled America, possibly after stealing a necklace. The gym owner, however, insists Mr. Miyagi was a trustworthy person. Daniel, struggling with his revelation, later wonders why his teacher never shared this aspect of his life with him. Later, he finds a Sakai Taikai headband covered in blood, implying that Mr. Miyagi once competed in the tournament. He also learns that the match ended in the opponent's death. Traveling to Spain for answers, he's lured into a trap and kidnapped, and it's revealed that Terry Silver orchestrated it. Silver shows him a record confirming that Mr. Miyagi won a death match. Distraught, Daniel later has a nightmare of himself facing his mentor in that deadly fight. Marvelous verdict! Mr. Miyagi's influence remains a guiding force in Daniel's life as he strives to rediscover the balance his mentor once instilled in him. Ralph Macchio, who plays the character, emphasized the importance of preserving Mr. Miyagi's legacy, saying that they don't want the human element of the show to get lost, and that human element really stems from Mr. Miyagi. According to him, Cobra Kai exists because of Pat Morita's performance in the films. The heart and soul of the Karate Kid universe are the teachings of Mr. Miyagi. The things he had taught to Daniel aren't just applicable in karate and fights, they can also be useful in every aspect of life. Cultivating balance is important, not just for defeating opponents, but also to lead a deep life without regret. Mr. Miyagi's mentorship is more than just teaching karate. It was a deep, lifelong bond that went well beyond the dojo. He wasn't just a teacher, he became a father figure to Daniel as well as Julie, shaping them not only as fighters but as people. And maybe that's why he remains one of the most beloved mentor figures in all of cinema, even 40 years after the release of the first Karate Kid movie. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.